Hi everyone, I'm Claire Bone. I'm a clinical psychologist and postdoctoral researcher at the University of Sheffield.
Hi, I'm Mel Simmonds-Buckley. I'm also a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Sheffield.
Hi, I'm Jamie Delgadillo. I'm a senior lecturer in clinical psychology at the University of Sheffield.
We're here today to talk about a recent paper we've had published in the Lancet Digital Health, and this describes the development of AI Oracle. AI Oracle is a dynamic progress feedback system. It's designed to support clinicians who want to understand whether a person they're working with is responding to psychotherapy or not. The development of AI Oracle was a collaboration, so we collaborated with colleagues in NHS IAP services in Leeds and Cumbria, and we also collaborated with researchers from the University of Trier in Germany. AI Oracle uses incoming weekly progress scores from therapy. So in IAPT, they use the PHQ-9, which is a depression measure, and GAD-7, which is an anxiety measure. So the Oracle uses these scores to produce a predicted probability of whether someone will see reliable or clinically significant change at the end of therapy. So each week, the models provide an updated chance of someone seeing recovery based on this new incoming information. There were two phases involved in developing AI Oracle. So there was the model development phase and then the cross-validation phase. So in model development, we used data from IAP Leeds, and we used logistic regression models, and we used various predictors. So we had a baseline score at intake, we had the weekly incoming session scores, and we also used computations of these. So we had an individual level predictor, which was a person's own standard deviation, so how much they deviated from their own mean, and we added this cumulatively across time. And we also created a sample level predictor. So we created a risk sum. So where an individual's score exceeded the sample mean plus one standard deviation, we created a risk spike, and we counted these risk spikes cumulatively across time as well. The models were cross-validated in a separate sample, so a completely separate service, and completely different sample in a different area of the country. So we used data from IAP Cumbria for cross-validation. And we used area under the curve and positive and negative predictive values to assess accuracy of the models. And the results were really encouraging. So if we take high intensity treatment as an example, the models showed clinically useful accuracy by session 3. So there was an area under the curve of 0.74 at session 3, and high accuracy by session 7 onwards, so an area under the curve of 0.81. The AI Oracle also explained up to 38.2% of variability in outcomes. We also run further tests of AI Oracle in phase 2, and I'll hand over to Mel to describe those.
So as Claire explained, the findings from study 1 enabled us to identify the best performing, most parsimonious version of the AI Oracle model. So the objective of study 2 was to take that optimal model and further evaluate its performance. We did this by first retraining the algorithm in a much larger multi-service sample with data from over 40,000 patients. We then used an external test sample to compare AI Oracle's performance with a series of other alternative prediction modelling approaches. So this meant we were able to see how accurately the models were able to predict treatment outcome in a completely separate set of patients that had not been used to train the algorithm. So the model's AI Oracle was compared to with the conventional expected treatment response curves, often called ETR curves, which are the models that have been used in the existing psychotherapy feedback systems, as well as 5 much more computationally intensive machine learning approaches. So these were a Bayes logistic regression that uses prior probabilities of recovery from previous sessions to inform the predictions for new sessions, a regularized regression approach applying an elastic net model. There was a support vector machine, a decision tree approach called XGBoost, and finally a neural network. So all these models were built on the same data with the same predictors, and we compared their predicted performance in this out of sample group. So I'm going to pick out 3 key findings from the results, which we think were really interesting. First, the AI Oracle's performance showed a similar pattern as what we saw in study 1, with the algorithm prediction accuracy improving over time and reaching an optimal threshold with an AUC of greater than 0.8 by session 7 for high intensity treatments. And this explained up to 47% of the variability in treatment outcomes. So as these results come from a completely new sample, it shows that AI Oracle's performance generalizes well to multiple services and also different regions in the UK, with pretty good accuracy as early as session 3. The second finding was that the AI Oracle model consistently outperformed the conventional ETR models, so the ones that are used currently in the existing outcome feedback systems. The ETR models showed less accurate predictive ability relative to the other models and also had the lowest amount of explained variance, with a maximum of 31%. And the third and final finding was that the AI Oracle, despite being a much more parsimonious and less complex approach, performed as well as the machine learning models. So we saw all the models had a highly similar performance indices. So in this situation, using a more complex, sophisticated method did not produce significantly better predictions than the logistic regression model. So I'll now let Jamie summarise and discuss the implications of these findings.
In summary, these findings demonstrate that it's possible to predict psychotherapy treatment outcomes with impressive accuracy, using data that is easy to collect in routine care. These prediction and feedback models have great potential to improve treatment outcomes. For example, a meta-analysis of over 50 studies published this year by Kim de Jong and colleagues shows compelling evidence that using routine outcome monitoring and feedback systems helps to improve treatment outcomes and to reduce dropout in psychotherapy. This finding is now well established and has been replicated in different countries. Despite this, not all psychological services use routine outcome measures or feedback systems, and this is one of the current barriers to modernize and to improve psychological care. We hope that the evidence that we have produced can contribute to the wider adoption of routine outcome monitoring and feedback-informed treatment.
So thank you everyone for listening. If you want to find out more about our study, then follow the link that we've included below.